Welcome to the Chess Angle. In this episode, I will be discussing playing at your local chess club versus playing in a major event. So stick around. Okay, so let's talk about playing at your local club versus playing in a major event or a major chess tournament. There are some differences, and I'd like to discuss it and share my thoughts on that. So let's talk about your local club first. When you play at your local club, it's close to home, which is convenient, and the games are generally spread out to a once a week type of format. Okay, usually the time control might be something like game 90 or game in 2 hours, usually with a 5-second delay, which is standard now. And the good thing about the games being once a week is that it's an easier time commitment. The games are spread out. So if you had a bad night, you have a week to kind of shake it off. And, you can get to work the next day. It's not a problem because it's, at night. And the prizes are generally modest at your local club. Most people go to play for their rating because they love the game. And some go to their local club just to play, and that's it. They're not concerned about rating or prizes. And I often wonder if they enjoy the game more than many of us who are concerned about rating. And with your local club, you're running into the same people, you're running into your friends. And from a chess point of view, the advantage with that is that you get to know your opponent's opening styles and his playing style, so you can kind of get comfortable and know what to expect. Now let's talk about playing in some of the major events. Okay. It's kind of a different thing. It's a very different thing, actually, because the approach is different. Your competition is going to be different. And there are certain parameters about major events that distinguish it from local clubs. Now, I am going to be mentioning some negative things about the major events, but understand, and I want to be clear about this, most of the cons I'm mentioning are not the fault of the organizers, but rather are just inherent in how major events are structured. Okay. So the organizers of these major events, they work very hard. There's a special place for them. They should all be given medals. It's a lot of work. It's a thankless job, I would assume. There's only one thing about the way that the tournaments are structured by the organizers that I am going to criticize. But other than that, most of this is just about the natural structure of these major events, just by the very nature of, how they're organized. So I'll explain what I mean by that. So with major events, one of the good things about that is that you're running into new players. Okay. Although, funnily enough, you might go to a major event hoping to play some new players other than the regulars you see at your club. But very often your friends at the club show up as well. So it's funny, the ongoing joke with a couple of tournaments I played in the past was that like my first 3 pairings were actually other locals. So that can happen. All right. And with the major events, you're dealing with, the weekend warriors. That's really the term for it, because you're playing several games over the course of a weekend. So that structure is a lot of what I'm going to talk about. You're playing several hours in one day, which is tough to do, but that's the nature of how these events are organized. Now, with the major events, you're also dealing with big cash prizes. And that's the one thing I am going to criticize the organizers about and these events in general, because I do think that's a problem. I think with the big money prizes, you're attracting people, or some people, I should say, who are there, just for the money and just for the prizes. And, you might encourage, cheaters or sandbagging, although they are cracking down on that. The other problem is that it ends up presumably raising the entry fee. If you have prizes that are less expensive, that aren't these big cash prizes, that are more tangible things like trophies or books or memorabilia, I mentioned this in a previous episode, then you would get people show up to these tournaments who are really there just to play and who really just love the game and are there for that reason alone. And you can lower the entry fee as well, which can be, several $100s. So if you reduce the prizes, you can reduce the entry fee and presumably get more people to play. Now, the good thing about these events, and there are a number of things, a lot of times there's vendors selling books and equipment and memorabilia. And even if you don't buy anything, it's always fun to just browse that stuff. The other thing is there's often free lectures by grandmasters and other strong players, which can be great. Sometimes they'll even analyze your games. And then there's also side events. There'll be like a bug house tournament or a speed tournament. So it's a fun thing and there's something to do. Even if you don't want to participate in the main event, a lot of people just show up, chess players, just to, check out the vendors, maybe play in the side events, look at the lectures. That's very common. People show up to these tournaments not to play, but just for the scene, so to speak. And another good thing is that these major events do attract chess stars. You are going to see some grandmasters there and maybe some international masters. And it's always fun to watch them play at the top boards. Although it's funny, at the top boards, it seems like there's only one player there sitting at a time. Each player moves and then they get up. At least that was my experience. But anyway, you can see some big players at these events. And what usually happens is you're staying at a hotel, all right? Because these events are held at hotels or resorts. And usually what they do is the big room in the hotel, it's usually some type of ballroom. That's where it's held. And then because you're staying at the hotel, you can simply just take the elevator down to the main room and play. So it's very convenient. So as far as the expense, and this is one thing with major events, it's a lot of money, okay? Because not only are you paying the entry fee, which can range from about $100 to $300 or more, depending on the size of the event. You have that. Then you have obviously food and beverages. And then you have, any transportation expenses. And then, of course, the hotel room every night. So, between the entry fee, the hotel, all this stuff, it's several $100s just for this one tournament. And then if you do poorly, if you have a bad outing, I mean, it depends on how you look at it. Are you losing money or is that just how it goes? Are you looking at it just for the experience? But I've seen players, it'll be a 5 or a 6 or a 7 round tournament. They'll lose, let's say, the first 2 or 3 games, and then they'll just drop out, and of course you don't get the entry fee back. So it's something to think about. Whereas at your local club, if you're having a bad tournament, okay, maybe you're out $30 or $40. So something to think about. Now, the other thing at these major events, just my experience, I don't know, you run into a lot of sketchy characters. Like some of these players, I don't know, they either just their behavior in general, or they're playing a lot stronger than their rating. And I'm wondering like what's going on. I've played players who were rated, 12, 13, 1400 who were making like inexplicably good moves. And it seems that this happens more at the major events than at the local clubs. I don't know what it is. And that's nobody's fault. That has nothing to do with the organizers or anything. It's just kind of a phenomenon that I've noticed with these major events is you get these players with these quote unquote lower ratings who play really, really well. Now, it could be a number of reasons. It could be that maybe they've just been playing chess for a long time and only recently joined the federation. So even though they're unrated, they're actually stronger. It could be maybe they've taken a break from playing and came back and they're much stronger. Who knows? But you all know what I'm talking about. Those types of players where they're much stronger than their rating, I tend to find more of those at the major events than at the local clubs. Just my experience. Maybe yours is different. And the next thing I want to talk about is the schedule. The fact that you're playing so many games or so many hours in one day. I mean, it might be just 2 games in one day, I should say, but each game can last several hours. So it's kind of a quote unquote, kind of like a dirty schedule almost. There was a piece in Chess Life about this where, somebody was talking about that. It's almost not normal to play that many games in one day. But again, I understand they don't have a choice because they're fitting it in over the course of a weekend from a Friday night to, let's say, a Sunday night, or sometimes it might go into Monday if Monday is, say, a holiday and they know the kids don't have school, something like that. But playing those back-to-back games is very, very tough and not something that you have to deal with at the club level. For example, let's say you're playing a game down to the bitter end. I mean, it's just a rough, tough battle, and it's down to the wire, and let's say you lose. We all know how like frustrating and even infuriating that can be. But what happens is with these weekend tournaments, if your game went that far, you might only have like a 20-minute or 30-minute break before the next game. So you mean to tell me you're going to re-energize, shake off that tough loss, and then boom, like start from scratch like 20 minutes later? That's tough to do. And if you look at studies of the human brain, there can only be so much focus in one day. I mean, I read something that the average person can only give 6 hours of intense focus per day at the most, something like that. But these games are several hours. So in a way, the playing schedule is not normal, quote unquote. But again, I understand that's just the nature of these events because they have to fit the games in. If they want to fit in 5 games over the course of a weekend, they have to do it that way, and I get that. But as a result, there can be a very rushed feel to the games. I mean, to be fair, most games usually don't go that long, but it could. And then as far as the schedule, you really need to clear the decks, so to speak. So you're working during the week, you have home responsibilities. Your mind has to be completely clear. If you're going to play in a weekend tournament, you have to shut all that out. And that's very hard to do. Whereas at the club level, you're just going for your one game for, say, 3 hours, and then that's it. So something to think about. All right, so now, what's the verdict? What do I recommend to beginners? What's my, thought in general? Well, here we go. It really depends on what you want, what your financial situation is, and probably most important, the type of playing conditions that you prefer. Now, if money is a situation, or if you just don't want to spend that much, then stick with your local club. Because most local clubs, you're going to spend whatever it is, $25, $35, $40 around there for an entire tournament. It might be a multi-week tournament where it's one game per week, but generally like $30, $40, and you're good for the entire tournament. Okay. And that could be for like 4 or 5 games. If you think about going to the movies or going out to dinner or what a round of golf costs, that's actually the deal of a lifetime for that. So your local club is an excellent deal financially. However, some people like the ambiance of the major events. They like the fact that they can play on the weekend, they're not working, and the fact that there's multiple games in one day doesn't bother them. So that's the other thing. For me, at this point, it's a little too much chess in one weekend for me because I know I won't be able to hold my concentration, and then you end up playing poorly. And like I said, if your game goes down to the bitter end, you don't have much recovery time before the second game. All right. And the other thing is you got to be careful of not catching up, so to speak. Like, let's say you lose your first or second game at your local club. If you lose a game, you kind of have a week to shake it off. But at these major events, you don't have the luxury of that. So let's say you have a tough loss, you're going to feel this need to sort of catch up, so to speak, and get a win. And then you might end up trying too hard. So it's a lot of discipline to play that type of schedule. So I tend to favor the local clubs for that reason, but it depends on what you want. Some people can handle that much chess in one weekend. Some people like that. Some people have sort of the inner fortitude to handle that, but it all depends. But I've seen plenty of players, myself included, they get pumped up for one of these major events. And this happened more when I was younger. I really don't play in these anymore. I just don't have time to commit an entire weekend. They'll go there with great intentions and they'll end up just losing and dropping out. I mean, if you look at the wall chart for some of these major events, you'll see a lot of people drop out after 1 or 2 rounds. So it happens. So it's something to think about. It really depends on what you're looking for. Again, my only real criticism from an organizational point of view are these large cash prizes. I think those have to go. But other than that, The organizers do a fantastic job. It's a thankless job, and they should be appreciated for putting these events together. And as you noticed, most of my criticisms really had to do with just the nature of a major weekend event itself. That has nothing to do with the organizer. It's just part of the nature of how these events play out, because you're playing so many games in one weekend. So just my thoughts, again, really depends on what you're comfortable with. Try it out, see where you perform better. If you perform better at your local club and you're getting crushed at the major events, maybe it's not a good idea. If for some reason you find you're thriving at the major events and maybe the club level is, not happening, that might be better for you. It all depends, but I just kind of wanted to share my thoughts and experience, both as a player, and a TD of a local club. We appreciate you listening. Have a great day. Thank you.